Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Council of Elrond podcast, where we discuss all things Lord of the Rings. I'm Dave, and I'm joined by my brother Johnny, as always. And today we're breaking down episode 8, the finale of the Rings of Power season 2, entitled Shadow and Flame. But first, I'm thrilled to introduce an amazing guest to the show this week, a man who almost needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyways because he's awesome. The number one Lord of the Rings YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers, lore master, Tolkien book lover, all-round film geek. A huge warm welcome to the council, Matt from Nerd of the Rings. Matt, how's it going?
It's going good, man. That is quite the intro, I have to say. Like I feel very humbled by that intro.
Great. Well, I was going to ask you to introduce yourself and let everyone know where they can find you in case they're a dwarf and living under a rock.
So my main platform is on YouTube, Nerd of the Rings on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. I think Instagram is at Nerd of the Rings and Twitter is at Nerd of the Rings 1. So I try to stay off Twitter for the most part. I feel like that's a good mental health call. But I like Instagram. It's a little more my vibe.
Yeah. Definitely. And we'll put all your links in the description below. But first, before we begin, I just want some housekeeping. So please, guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. Or if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, leave us a review. Tell us what you thought of the finale. And also, guys, Irish listeners and viewers, this weekend, October 5th and 6th, we will be at Octocon 2024 in Dublin, in the Gibson Hotel, to meet you guys, discuss Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, all upcoming Middle-earth projects. So it's going to be fun. And there's going to be a Lord of the Rings panel too, which I'm going to be on. So come check us out. I'll attach all the information in the description below and you can get your tickets there. So on to the episode. This is the last episode of season 2, the finale. I'm going to break this down in categories, starting with Dwarves, then Eregion, then The Stranger, Numenor, and Pelargir. And if we don't get to the latter ones, that's okay. We want to get into the meaty stuff. So, Johnny, I'll come to you first. We open with Durin in his new badass-looking armor finding Disa, who says, "It's the ring. It has him, mind and soul." And it's a great emotional opening with the music swelling to a kiss between the two. But what I wanted to hear were your thoughts on the dialogue between the Durins, the father and son, in this scene.
Oh yeah, that was really good. But the couple of notes that I had written down myself were to do with those things that you mentioned. Like I thought that the music swelling up while they had that little kiss together, that was really, really nice. And I wrote down the quote as well from Durin to Durin, where they were talking about how he's strong enough to wield an axe against his father and that kind of thing. And he says there was nothing stronger than his father, and then he said that be strong again, father. So that was really, really heartwarming, and I think it's done, and I think it's acted really well. And I remember that when he says, what does he say? He says, "When I was a wee lad," and he starts into that story of this like kind of nostalgia thing. There's this like one solo violin playing, and then it kind of builds up to this choir and this huge amount of strings all playing, and it just swells up with the dwarven theme. And that's when he's talking and he's telling his father about him letting him lift his hand just enough so that he would think that he could win. But then his father would slam his hand down again. And I thought this worked really well because there was lots of kind of like to's and fro's and kind of swinging in one direction and swinging in the other direction, because when he said, "You slammed my hand down," I was like, oh, that sounds like it's going to be a negative thing. And then he says, "So I could see there was nothing as strong as my father." So I was like, oh, and then it was positive again. And then later on his father confirms it's like, "I wasn't letting you that was you just getting stronger yourself." So there was this kind of over and back. And it happened as well another couple of times when he finishes the story. He says, "Be strong again, father." And it's really positive, and you feel like quite hopeful in that moment. You think the father, he might actually be finally getting through to his father, but then finally his father says, "A real dwarf doesn't beg," or something like that, and then you're like, oh no. And so I thought that over and back was really, really well done, and a lot better than other dialogues have gone so far. So that was a really a strong point of starting, I think.
Yeah, and Matt, you can chime in on this as well. Like there's some other great parts where he says it's not our mountain father, you taught me that, and the response with these rings it could be. So, what did you make of this? And then also after that, I want to hear your thoughts on the Balrog scene in general.
Oh,
yeah. So, I really like the father and son thing. I think that's been a strength of these two characters and the two performances of the actors. Like, gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. Is it Peter Mullen? That's
Peter
during
Mullen,
the
yeah.
third.
Peter Mullen.
He just seems like just the dwarfiest dwarf, and yeah, I love I love the moment, where he says that was you getting stronger, like as a dad, stuff like that. It just
you can see the little kid enduring the forwards just being like, oh, my dad's giving me that approval.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought those were lovely lines. The Balrog was interesting because I called it Chekhov's Balrog in season 1, because I was like, it has to go off at some point because they showed it. I'm curious to see if that is the extent of the Balrog in this show, or if they're gonna go full on Fall of Khazad-dûm. I think maybe that might be it for the Balrog, and it's
do you think he might get like caved back into that little area? Is that what could have happened?
I
like
think
the little
that's
kind of
what
explosion.
I think that's what we're led to believe, like with the cave-in, that now that's sealed off again, and so unless they go digging there again, which that begs the question, why would they go digging there again? And I said this last night during my watch party, but the only thing I can think of is, it's well over 2,000 years after this that the Balrog is awoken. And so the only thing I can think of is, that's a long time. So if that story that is right now just known by kind of like 3 or 4 people, if that gets passed off as rumor or disregarded as, rumor or legend, that it's feasible, maybe that during the 6th, when he comes around, that they say, oh, but is there really a monster? That's just a story made up for kids, kind of thing.
The real question is, do Balrogs have wings?
They don't.
Okay. The end of the argument.
But no, they look really cool with wings. I appreciated the fact that the wings were very much made of smoke. I thought that was kind of cool. It kind of edged around that debate a bit, because that's one of those fun debates. It's nothing that I will ever get worked up seeing a Balrog with wings, and I'll never get worked up seeing one without wings. But it's kind of fun it's a fun debate to have among fans.
There's so much cool fan art of both with wings and without.
Of both,
so,
for sure.
It's great.
But I thought the shot of Doran charging the Balrog, like the slow-mo shot, like that was a really cool shot.
That could have been straight out of a Marvel movie.
I mean, it could have, but it looked cool. I think I wouldn't use it in a derogatory way, saying it's out of a Marvel movie, but
that was not meant. That was not meant as a pejorative.
Oh yeah,
I was going to ask.
Because I have other things with the show that I use it. It's very Marvel in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
This is one of those Marvel in a good way. But yeah,
I'm saying Marvel pre-Endgame.
There you go. Right. There you go. But it was a really cool shot for sure.
Yeah, I thought that the Balrog, he looked really great in this scene. Like, I thought they spent all their money on this shot because it looked fantastic and it was a great opener for this episode. And I want to give a little shout out as well to the music, Bear McCreary, in this, because I felt like the music behind that slow-mo shot was very reminiscent of Game of Thrones, the great Sept explosion scene. I think it's called Light of the Seven by Ramin Djawadi. I actually saw him live. He's great. But some of the great quotes in this scene where he says, where Doran says, "I never let you lift your hand. It was you, just getting stronger. Forgive me, my son, King Doran." So very heartfelt, very emotional. Great start to the episode.
I love
So,
how in this scene the Balrog appears and there's all this like huge noise and explosions basically going on. There's mountains falling apart and King George just basically whispers from like 20 yards away, and like his son can hear it perfectly, and he's like, yeah, forgive me, my son. And it's just like Prince George is just like, I'm sorry, what was that, father? What'd you say?
it would have been a lot less heartfelt if he's there screaming it, and then Durin is like, sorry, what?
It's like when people can see each other from a ridiculous distance and they like make eye contact on the battlefield, and it's like, dude, they're like 100 yards apart.
Head
like,
nod.
Yeah, true. So obviously we don't get to see the dwarves for a long time in the episode, but we're going to circle back to them anyways. Johnny, I'll come to you on this. We see them grieving King Durin later, so spoiler alert, he's obviously dead. Disa tells Durin that there's a power struggle now as the lords of the Blue Mountains, or the Ered, are looking to collect their tributes. So I thought the interesting part of this is that we find out that Durin has a brother. Or did we already know that, Johnny? What did we know?
From
that
my
Durin
memory, this is the
they
first
mention him. They mention
they
him
do.
in season 1. Yeah, they do mention that he has a brother, but that's it. So it's kind of like it was here. Yeah, I know. It's very, very out of left field fielding a bit.
And so
it's just kind of building that tension for season 3. Like, exactly. What's going to be happening in season 3?
What do you think is going to happen in season 3 with the dwarves now with this tension? There's a power struggle. What's going to happen particularly with the rings?
I don't know. I just feel like I'm getting sort of vibes of like, what's your man's name? Is it Euron Greyjoy, the uncle, when he kind of just shows up suddenly and he's like, oh, now I'm going to be the kind of the jerk in this scene where I'm going to be just basically counterpointing the person, whoever's on screen or whoever's our hero in that moment. In this case, King Durin, who is now going to be King Durin the Fourth. So I don't know, but I mean, it kind of sells itself. We know what's going to be happening. He's going to be the antagonist, I suppose, and he's going to have his own little. They already mentioned it there. They said he's already gathering lots of support. So surely some of the, I don't know, maybe the dwarves from the Blue Mountains, maybe even some of them have infiltrated into Khazad-dûm, and some of the local dwarves there think Durin himself maybe is not. I mean, we've seen Durin working in the mines, and he clearly doesn't have the respect from all the dwarves. They were like, you've just been polishing gems all your life, so maybe his brother can gain more respect from some of those dwarves. And I'm sure that'll just be the over and back of. And again, that's probably how we're going to end up seeing something with the Rings of Power, because if it was just down to Prince Durin, who's going to be the king now, I'm sure he'd just be like, okay, I'm not giving these rings out. I'm just going to have them destroyed, or, well, I mean, how would he do that, I suppose? Didn't they say in the books that not even the furnaces of the dwarves can destroy the Rings of Power? They'd have to go look for a dragon, maybe. And
Dragon fire.
Feed it to the Balrog. Like, would that work? Maybe.
Do you think that it's going to be
Probably
another
not.
Durin, the brother, and he's going to be the one to pass the ring down?
I hope not. That'd be
Imagine
weird.
that. Like, can you imagine having
weird.
King Durin and his two sons, Durin and Durin? It's just...
It's already confusing enough with two Durins, with father and son, but I can't imagine adding another Durin in there.
Well, I mean, if they're going kind of by the lore, this brother cannot be king. Like, this Durin has to be king because...
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm
it's
sure it'd
very
just be
odd.
like it could be just a season 3 story where he comes in and there's this kind of over and back, and then maybe eventually at the end of season 3, either Durin wins or else he just wins the respect of his brother, and his brother concedes and says, you know what, you're right, you should be the rightful king. I imagine that's the way it's going to go, but just to create a bit of tension and for it not to be so of just handing off the mantle and saying you're immediately going to be the king of the mountain. So I think it could be well done. I've seen lots of similar plots play out in movies, and there's always good little bit of tension between two brothers who want to become the heirs. So
I do like the idea that you present there of the brother coming around and kind of getting behind Durin as the king. That would be a nice contrast to like what we see in Numenor, because there's the power struggle there, and I was one of my hesitations was like, is this just going to feel like a rehash? Like, are we just doing the Numenor thing again with Farazan and Miriel, and there's going to be a usurping of the crown kind of thing. But yeah, that actually gives me a little bit more hope for that idea, where the brother ends up allying with him.
That's what we did on our podcast, anyways. Yeah, so I think we can leave the dwarves there and we'll move swiftly on to Eregion. And the first shot of Eregion in this episode is a single shot without any cuts. The camera maneuvering throughout the city, seeing its destruction as elves and orcs fight. Yeah, what did you think of this shot, Matt? This opening shot.
Yeah, I think, it's a cool oneer, oneers are always cool when they're well done, and I don't know if I have like particularly strong feelings about it. Like it does the thing with the one continuous shot. I was a little like, because my mind kind of works like this. The elf like jumps down to the floor level, and I was like, that was a really bad idea, dude. Like, why are you jumping down where the orcs are? Like, you should stay up top.
I thought exactly the same.
Yeah, okay.
Really?
So I'm not the only one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really cool from, we'll have the camera panning down while he slides down the roof, and then he gets just nailed in the neck with an arrow straight away. It looked visually class, but immediately I was like, that didn't make any sense. But visually, I was like satisfied, but then, story-wise, not so much. But
I mean, I think I really like this shot because, first of all, we're getting to see more than just outside of Celebrimbor's tower.
Yeah.
Also, it was nice to see someone that's not Arondir or Galadriel, just like an unnamed elf, do something kind of cool and elf-like. Getting to see, the elves doing something, firing arrows, and maybe more orcs on screen than we're used to, I thought was pretty nice. But it was a nice introduction. We get Galadriel. She's also guiding some elves out of the city and is captured by orcs, and she offers 9 rings. So Johnny, what did you think? Galadriel using the old dwarven tunnels that apparently were there long ago.
Yeah, to guide all 7 people out of them, or however many it was. And also I liked how when they were like finally coming out, there was just like birds chirping, and it's like, oh, we're safe, it's amazing. And it's like, oh no, there's a whole party of orcs there. But my first thought was, do Adar's orcs know about the 9 rings that Celebrimbor and Anatar were making in secret? I was like, and she was
they shouldn't. Yeah.
Does even Adar know? And then has he told all of his orcs in the army? I don't know. It seemed a bit weird. Obviously, it's just like, okay, the people watching this show know about the 9 rings and they know what's going on in Eregion. So let's just get to there, and let's just have Galadriel use them as a way to say, like, look, spare the lives of these people. So, I mean, I understand it from a TV series perspective, but again, some of those things are a little bit annoying when you're kind of going, it just... the links don't all connect, and things don't add up all the time. But I'm willing to let lots of those things go, so I didn't mind it too much. But I did think it was strange how Galadriel was just willing to kind of say, look, I'll give you the 9 rings straight away. I hope that it would have been a ploy, and she wasn't just like, save these random elves I've never met and take the 9 rings, because she should be defending it with her life the same way she defended her own ring with her life.
And she had more rings than people that she saved, at that point.
Exactly it. Yeah.
I mean, not that it's a one to, not that the math has to work like that, but, and this is one of the things I've brought up a lot, and I'm sure we'll get into it later with, with Rivendell and everything. I feel like, and I've always said, the show kind of struggles with scale, where, we see Eregion, like, as far as I can tell, Eregion is defended by like 15 to 20 elves. We saw Adar has an army. We saw Elrond has an army. But after some of those initial wide shots, it's all tight stuff. And then everything throughout this episode, it's like, okay, here's a small batch of orcs. Here's 3 elf leaders. And then we get to Rivendell. It's like we have 40 survivors. Sauron has about 8 orcs, that he's given orders to, who are overwhelmed by the dwarves. But then Sauron has enough forces that he can continue marching, Gil-galad said. So I just wish it would show us some bigger crowds of people, because I can't tell how many people are supposed to be in Eregion.
That's
And stuff like
completely
that.
an argument that we've brought up many times as well here. There's between Numenor and this season now more in Eregion and even in that battle in episode 7. That's definitely something. And actually, I was going to mention it later on, but since we're speaking about that now, the very final part of this episode where we get to see the elves again when they're founding Rivendell or in Landris, they're like, we see that they're up Gil-galad and Galadriel and I can't remember, Arondir. I think there's a couple of people up on a high point and they're looking down and it's scanning across, and they're all standing about 2 meters apart, so they almost to try and like fill up the space. And then it kind of scans across, and I watched it back a couple of times and I counted. Do you remember the guy with the elf that was part of the little party that went to the Barrow Downs? And
Vorahil.
He was like, what was his name?
Vorahil.
Yeah, I remember seeing his name, I think on the X-ray or whatever it's called, Prime X-ray. He comes up 5 times on 5 different occasions when we're hearing that speech at the end, and they're going across, and then Gil-galad pulls out his sword and sticks it up, and they're like, they're all chanting and screaming like, yay, whatever. There's 5 separate occasions where they show him, and he's the only elf in armor as well, so he really stands out. And I was like, that's the kind of little details that just make it feel small. And people are like, oh, why does it feel like we're not getting this huge mass, this huge vast expanse of people? Because they're using the same people in this little tight shots all the time. And I think that's something that they really need to work on for the next season, hopefully.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, and we mentioned that it's almost kind of like bragging rights are showing off the fact that we don't need to use CGI, because maybe they think like a lot of people were upset with the likes of The Hobbit and things like that. But like, use CGI well, obviously have the prosthetics or have the guys in armor, but background characters, and they definitely do that. They have used CGI, because there's no way they had like, I don't know, 10,000 orcs on screen at one time, which they had a lot in the Siege of Eregion. But
even the scene where, sorry to come in again,
no worries.
Even the scene where Adar is announcing to, or he's like, he's revealing his army to Galadriel, that moment, and I was expecting him to kind of go, look at my army, and I thought it was going to be one of these like Sauron revealing the 10,000 Uruk-hai kind of moments, and you got like, you can see the wind is blowing in the face of Wormtongue, and it's just like either the wind or it's just the breath of this 10,000 Uruk-hai screaming. It was just it was so impactful. Whereas I was like really left like uninspired by that. Like, I mean, I was like looking at it, I was like, is there that many there? And then obviously the camera zooms down, and again it swerves around with the little campfires, and you see, oh, there is actually quite a lot. But the overall, like the establishing shot wasn't that, I don't know, it didn't blow me away, and I want to be blown away.
Yeah.
It's hard to
I think some selective use of CG crowds would go a long way. It's like the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Like, there's 100,000 orcs or whatever, and it's like, clearly a lot of the action scenes, like, they had a lot of extras, which I think a lot of extras would help too. But it's a few wide shots to establish the big armies, and especially, as it's weird, like, as we wrap up, like we said, Galadriel saving like 7 elves from Eregion. Like, it just feels so small, and it's like you have these great big realms that should be populated with a lot of people, and it just doesn't feel that way. And Numenor is another example where it's like you have this great big realm. Like, I remember in season 1, it's like the same hallway, or the same alleyway is used like 3 times. Yeah. And it's like, why is this the spot where everyone meets, in this big city? So yeah, I think that's definitely a big area for improvement that would go a long way to make it feel more grandiose and epic.
Yeah, I hope that is something that they bring into season 3, because I do feel like they have learned from a lot of mistakes of season 1 and have improved season 2 immensely. By the way, this is probably a good time to put in the fact that I want people to know that are listening that we're not bashing this for trolling. We like to nitpick things, and like Johnny said before in a previous episode, if you love something, you want to discuss it and you want to talk about it to death, and yeah, it's just what we love to do. So, anyways, back to
it's one of those things, like, people are so sensitive about whether you like or dislike something, and like we don't have to live on this in this binary where it's like, no, you have to either love it or you have to hate it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we, like there's things we like, things we don't like, and we're going to talk about them because we're nerds, and we're going to talk about them for, probably months to come.
Yeah, exactly. That's the stance that we usually take here.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving back to Eregion, we get to see Celebrimbor being tortured by Sauron, which is great. He's being tortured for the location.
It's just great.
It's great. Like we get.
It is.
I wasn't sure where they're going to do it, but they do it. So
no, it was great. Just the way that you said, like, oh, he's getting tortured, which is great. I was just like, there's not many times that sentence makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, Johnny, what did you think of the torture? Or just in general, like we hear of orcs' bloodthirst at the fall of Gondolin and cool things like this.
I know. Yeah, I was getting very excited for any just little mentions, like I don't know what have they mentioned before? They mentioned when did they mention Tuor and Beren in one episode, and But just any of those little mentions from the Silmarillion are just like, I'm loving them. I'm assuming those names have popped up at some point in the Lord of the Rings where they have the rights to use them.
Yeah.
But it was it was great. I loved just the way he was kind of treating Celebrimbor as like his plaything. He was just there like firing arrows into his shoulder and just that was really, really cool. And again, we get that kind of, what is this? It says like look what you've done to yourself, and that kind of victim blaming again. It's still going on, and actually I wrote down this quote here. He says, "All I have done has been for you. Yours was the fire that crafted the marvels of the age. I wish only to share them with the world. Please let me." And so now again, I don't think this is the strongest over and back that these two characters have had in this season. But I think that's just because they set the bar so high. Because this has definitely been the strongest point of this season, and I think the manipulation has been just top tier. It's been really, really good stuff. So this kind of Sauron's kind of now switching just between like getting really angry, like, give me the 9, I want the 9. Then he's like, oh, but really it's all your fault or whatever. So I still think it's really, really good. I just think like it's not as good as it was maybe in episode 5. Was it episode 5? Was that the one where it was mainly all those two guys? But still, I thought that was really, really cool. And the actual torturing and then the flagpole was pretty great as well. It was nice to get to see a little bit of that.
Yeah. And there was some great dialogue. Matt, I wanted to ask you, especially because you were interviewing Charlie Vickers recently. So there's a great quote where one of the Charlies, Celebrimbor says, "Soon I shall go to the shores of the morning, borne hence by a wind that you can never follow." And then obviously he gets bannered. But yeah, what did you make of this scene and some of the dialogue?
I said in both my watch party and my breakdown, this is my favorite scene of the entire show from across both seasons. The Celebrimbor defiance, I really like, for all its craziness, like the Shadow of Mordor, flashbacks where we see Annatar and Celebrimbor. And Celebrimbor, running with his hammer to attack Sauron and everything. Like, that's cool, but it was pretty obvious this version of Celebrimbor was never going to do that. But we got this defiance, with his words in a way that clearly stings Sauron, and it makes sense for it to really sting Sauron. But yeah, the bit about like, his spirit will be beyond, he himself, like his spirit will be beyond Sauron's reach. And he says like, this is a wind that you can never follow. And it's kind of like, when your time comes, which as we know will be when the One Ring is destroyed, that's a wind that's going to push him the other way. The west wind that, the wind from the west, that same thing for Saruman actually. But yeah, I just thought it was some of the best writing and performance all rolled into one for this particular scene. And, the bit about him saying that Sauron is a prisoner to the rings, I thought was a great kind of reframing, not really reframing, but like an interesting angle to look at it. And it rings true with what we know of that relationship, because yes, like the One Ring gives him this great power over the Rings of Power, but it also makes it possible for Frodo to destroy him, and it makes it take much longer for him to
Yeah.
regain physical form after the Last Alliance because he doesn't have the ring. So yeah, it's kind of cool in a way that, you know, it plays into the idea that his greatest weapon also turns into his greatest weakness in a way.
And is he also kind of mocking him at the end when he calls him Lord of the Rings?
I think that's how we're meant to take it. Yeah, that he's like
Mm-hmm.
mocking him as Lord of the Rings because he called Celebrimbor that,
Sure.
you know, earlier in the
Yeah.
season. I kind of like in my mind, it's the smallest of nitpicks, but like in my mind, I thought it would have been cool if he called him something else of the ring, like Slave of the Rings or something like that. You know,
Mhm.
something to like dig in there a little bit more. But yeah,
Yeah,
I don't.
because I
Yeah,
kind of felt like that was a bit of a contradiction. He literally
yeah,
says you are a prisoner to the
yeah,
rings, and then he goes
and then he calls
Sauron,
him Lord.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, that was kind of interesting. But he does have some other cool things that he mentions. He calls him a shadow of Morgoth, which I thought was
yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, that was
He
cool.
he says your only craft is treachery. He also foresees that one alone shall prove your utter ruin. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that, because
yeah.
on my first watch, I kind of thought, one alone shall prove your utter ruin. I first thought he was talking about one person, and I was thinking Frodo Baggins. And then second time watching, I was like, is he talking about one
No,
ring?
I assume he meant
One
one
ring.
ring.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like my thought behind that, so initially I was kind of like, oh, one ring alone will prove your utter ruin, and I was like, oh, so like wouldn't that be more impactful if Sauron had already created the one, and it was like, hey,
Yeah.
that one that you just made, like it's going to cause your downfall. I think the way that they could frame it for it to make sense is, you know, if Sauron interprets this as like one of those three elven rings is gonna cause my downfall, so I need to get those, because we know in the books, like those are the ones he covets the most.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sure.
the 9 and the 9 and the 7, like that's great, but like he really badly wants the 3 and he never gets them. So maybe he assumes that Nenya or Narya or Vilya is gonna cause his downfall, and so that's why he continues to march across Eriador and everything, and then he creates the one hoping to, like, you know, negate those rings, you know, to take them off the playing board, to, you know,
Yeah.
remove them from the equation, maybe.
Yeah, I think that is the fact that Celebrimbor says, I foresee one alone
Yeah.
shall prove your utter ruin, rather than like, you know, that one that you just brought
Right,
here.
yeah.
Yeah. But
You know that
yeah,
one you've been thinking about making?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's showing again that he has some of the power of foresight as well, which a lot of the elves do. And I really think that Celebrimbor has come across so well in this season, just showing how kind of mighty and powerful he is as an elf in his own right, that it seemed almost from the earliest episodes that Sauron was just going to come in and completely dominate him, and whatever he said, Sauron was just going to say, oh, you want 9? No, yeah, of course. No, that's no problem. And again, I think it was maybe episode, I can't remember, maybe 3, where on, I think, 3 separate occasions he refused Sauron, you know, when he was Anatar, and he said, no, there's no way I'm making 9 rings for men. And he's like, oh, you bring this up again? No, I'm not doing it. And he had the foresight in that moment as well to realize this is a terrible idea. And even now he's kind of, there was another couple of things that he said that were really cool, like that I wrote down that he said, he kind of shouts, he says, hear the dying words of Celebrimbor, like as he's just kind of giving this final speech, which is, that's so cool. When you're like, I know I'm
so
on death's
poetic
door.
and Tolkien.
Yeah. And
yeah,
then
it's very Tolkien. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I had to write this one down as well, because he gives us a bit of a shout out, Dave, where he says there are ways
Melon.
of when Sauron says there are ways of keeping you alive, Melon, and I was like, oh,
yeah. I made a note of that as well, but that
Did
was
you?
in my
Yeah.
bloopers. No.
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. It's no blooper.
Also,
It's important.
I haven't really seen. I don't know. Is there much reaction online to this? But I suppose I'll get your fresh takes on it. Sauron sheds a tear as Celebrimbor dies. Is there any meaning to that, or is it just kind of, I don't know, he's unhappy that he's killing the person that he's worked with for so long and respected?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm not 100% sure, and I think it's left intentionally a bit open to interpretation. One being, you can kind of see why Sauron, why Anatar and Celebrimbor would have like this kinship, because Sauron was a servant of Aule and is, he's a smith, and so is Celebrimbor, and so like, and there's this, especially in the books where they work together for hundreds of years. You can imagine that maybe there's a sliver of like brotherhood there, that camaraderie that like he's closed the door on. Obviously that's done now. Very emphatically.
It also seems like they're trying to show that Sauron isn't really fully formed in this moment. He doesn't have exactly nailed down his own personality, and he's kind of still trying to like figure out, who am I, kind of thing. And even later on, like he has that conversation with Galadriel, and she says like, oh, this was your design all along, and he's kind of going, no, you give me too much credit. I'm kind of just winging it. I'm making it up as I go. So I think there are moments now. Earlier on in the season, we had a moment like this, and I thought, oh no, he's just completely manipulating him, and he totally knows what he's doing. But the more I've seen, I kind of think maybe what you thought initially, Dave, that maybe he does have these moments where he's kind of like a moment of maybe weakness, I suppose, to kind of become good, or not become good, but almost to kind of align himself a little bit more with Celebrimbor, or like maybe what we saw in season 1, where he said to Galadriel, like, you bind me to the light and I bind you to the power. So I don't know if that was all just kind of to try and manipulate. Maybe they're trying to say that part of it is actually that's what he's actually thinking, and that's what he actually means. So maybe, I don't know, that maybe that tear is just him also kind of having his own self-realization, like, okay, well, this is the way it's going to go. I have to go down this path now because I've killed Celebrimbor, and so maybe he's kind of, I don't know, but it's interesting the way they're going to go with it. But I think it's still open to interpretation. I think that they can still come down the road and they can still say, no, actually, it's all been a long game that he's been playing. And he was crying just so that the orcs would come in and see that tear, because he that's what he wanted to do. I don't know, but
I'm definitely like not so much interested in repentant Sauron. Like, I'm just like, give me the bad guy. Like, I don't care, with the whole feel, I'm not going to feel bad for him. So, him trying to be sympathetic, it's not going to work for me.
No, like him just like killing Glug later on was just fantastic.
I was like, yes, this is what I wanted. But
killing Murjani as well in the last episode was just so cool as well. He was just like, oh yeah, you think we're budding romance? It's like, no, you're dead. Just because it works for me in this moment. So that was class as well.
That's the stuff that I like to see, and I feel is also interesting to see him like dispatch, build people up or lead them on, and then just dispatch with them. But I think the tier could also be like, he's just been foretold with Celebrimbor's foresight of death, which I bring this up, I feel like I sound like a broken record because I keep talking about these same points on like everything I'm on, but this foresight of death like pops up, especially in the Silmarillion, it pops up a few times where someone's about to die and then they like make this proclamation, or they know they have this foreknowledge, and so maybe he understands the weight of that and is like, oh crap, I've screwed up somewhere and I don't 100% know where, kind of thing. And so it could be a tier for himself, actually. But I think they leave it vague on purpose, though.
That would be very Sauron, isn't it? Just having a tier for himself. I do think as well, just before the whole show, when the show was announced and before we had any details other than a couple of maps that were dropped on Twitter, we got some information that this will be a show based in the Second Age, where we get to see the rise of one of the biggest bad guys in history, which is Sauron. So maybe they kind of wanted to give it an angle of, we're going to do a little bit of character development here. Halbrand in season 1, still kind of not sure of himself in season 2, and then full on bad guy, the end of season 3, 4, 5, and so on. But yeah, one thing I like about Sauron is he always says that he has many names whenever he's asked who he is, which I thought that was cool.
Not going to tell.
I'm not going to tell you. But Johnny, we get to see Adar and he's wearing Nenya and he's healed. What are your first thoughts of Adar in this episode?
Yeah, we get hot Adar, which was weird.
Dadar.
I was
That's what you're waiting for.
that's what I was waiting. I was so worried that they were going to be like, when she said, "What's your name?" or something. I thought he was going to come out and say like Celeborn or something,
Yeah.
and I was like, "What is happening?" So, because I've just seen that rumor floating around on Twitter, so I'm glad that has been proven not to be the case. So, it was weird. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't
like
know
it.
what. I know. I thought it was class. Like, again, visually, I liked it. But again, I think Adar. That's just a pity he's been killed off already, isn't it? Because he was a cool character. I liked him. But I don't understand Galadriel. Really, I suppose that's just a general like overarching comment for the past 2 seasons. I suppose I don't understand how she can kind of align herself with. I don't know. She's like, oh, he's
Fighting
wearing
with
my
the
ring,
orcs.
and now his face is different. So I'm gonna go ahead and accept his offer.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use like the crown of Morgoth. Like, I mean, if there's ever been a kind of a item like, hey, would you like to take the power from the crown of Morgoth to like complete your task? I think that's a bit of a no-no. So
It's very much a MacGuffin there. Yeah.
yeah. So but a MacGuffin, but also to complete your task, you need to
Yeah,
use the
right.
one of the most evil artifacts in Middle Earth. It's almost kind of like what we saw with Tom Bombadil and the Stranger in the last one. He's like, oh, you've got 2 choices, and it's almost like he's pushing him to do the wrong one so that he'll choose the right one. And here I was like, this seems like it's the obvious thing as well, where Galadriel should say, of course I refuse to touch the crown of Morgoth, because that's clearly maybe the path to evil or whatever. It's the path to the dark side, I suppose.
Yeah.
If Yoda were here.
Yeah.
But in general, I've liked the kind of Adar Galadriel dialogues a lot. I think that they've worked quite well on screen together, even though, as I said, if I don't really understand Galadriel's motivations all the time. But yeah, as I said, I'll be sad to see him go. I don't understand why the orcs decided that they were going to just in a short space of time just do a 180 and kill Adar and then take on a new lord who's basically got the same goal. It's like, why do you want to revolt against Adar? Because he wants us to fight in this war and we're all going to die. Okay, we're gonna follow Lord Sauron. Lord Sauron, what's your command? I want you to destroy Eregion. It's like, oh well, that was what Adar told us to do. Okay, well that's fine. You know, so
Matt, I actually wanted to ask you about this. The fact that Glug betrays Adar. Like, this is something that we've been talking about on this channel. Like, I was looking forward to seeing how exactly they were going to change allegiances from Adar to Sauron. Is Sauron going to promise something, or I don't know. I thought there was going to be something. And so what did you make of the switch?
Yeah, I felt like the off-screen implication is more like it would have been more interesting to see, like, okay, what is Sauron's pitch to them that gets them to switch over? Like, obviously Glug in particular is primed and ready to switch sides because they've kind of been showing him, you know, interacting with Adar this whole time, and Adar's just like, keep throwing more bodies. You know, Adar started acting like the way Sauron would treat orcs, you know, just cannon fodder, you know. But yeah, I feel like it was missing, you know, like what's Sauron's pitch? I would imagine it's, hey, this Adar guy, you know, he's sending you to slaughter because he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, I am a mightier being and I will bring you victory and we will, you know, take over all the lands and you won't have to hide from the elves or something, you know. Like, I feel like there's something to his pitch that would be more about, we're done hiding in Mordor and we're gonna take over everything, and this is gonna be a world of orcs now or something. But written much more eloquently than what I just said, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it seemed more like we've seen Sauron manipulate Celebrimbor all season. So now are we just assuming that all the orcs are under his own new manipulation? So that's kind of what I got away from it, but I was hoping to see how he kind of actually enslaves the orcs so that they fear him. And I don't think it's like a, you know, because I think in episode 1,
when he's in Halbrand form, he says something to Adar like, "Oh, he's going to create these rings, and your children are going to be his servants again." I don't think it's like this magical thing where all of a sudden, because he's made the rings of power, the orcs are his slaves. Like that doesn't really compute. I think it's just a matter of like Adar led them down the wrong road, so he promises, I'm a greater being. I've returned from the dead. Like they killed me and I'm back. And and maybe it is like a fear thing. Like you can either align with me or I'll destroy everyone in this world, kind of thing.
That's true. I didn't think of that angle of like, I am Christ redeemed, almost like bow down and worship me. But anyways, the orcs, they basically Julius Caesared Adar. And that was definitely my biggest gasp of the season as well. That was a big shock for me. I thought, I did not see that coming. I don't know what you guys
as soon
thought.
as I saw Glug coming in on that little trolley,
Really?
I was like, oh yeah, I was like 100% he's going to betray here. He's going to mutiny. That's what I thought. But I was just impressed about how Adar managed to take like 100 stabs and still wasn't quite
his
done.
arm
He
up.
was like, I'm still, wait, I'm okay, now I'm dead.
Movie magic. But Johnny, we see Sauron then arrives. He grabs the crown and he has a little battle with Galadriel and he sees Nenya. What are your thoughts on this little battle?
Again, like as soon as it started, I was just like, why doesn't he just use his mind control that he used on the elves in the last episode, where he just could control them and they weren't able to move, so he could just like freeze people on sight. That was my first thought. Like, but then I was like, oh well, that probably wouldn't make for a great standoff final, TV kind of thing. So I mean, it's all like, oh well, what makes sense for the story? But I think visually we should go with this other thing, like we said earlier on, where the elf just kind of jumped down to a lower level. So visually, I wasn't mad at it. I thought it was kind of cool. I have to admit. And I thought some of the choreography was good. Some of it is a little bit just kind of, they're standing face to face and then Galadriel does that like spinning roundhouse kick and just like, I'm like, Sauron has shown that he's got better agility and better reflexes in every moment, and then she does like a twist to kick him in the head and he can't just lean back out of the way or something. But it's all just for cool visual effects. And as I said, I did have a big smile on my face while I was watching it. So I'm sorry if I enjoyed it. I'm sorry, people. Okay.
How dare you enjoy it?
I feel guilty.
See, so I mentioned the Marvel that I had a Marvel moment in a more derogatory way, and this was actually the Marvel derogatory way. Like the spin kick was one of those things where she says like the door is shut and then like spin kick to the face and stuff. And I was like, okay. And then after that, where she's holding out the ring, it looks like she's about to give the ring, and then she like, grabs it, closes her hand and says, "Heal yourself," and then like falls off the thing. And like those were the two where I was like that I would call Marvel moments in like a. It felt very comic booky.
I'm surprised she didn't give him the finger while she said heal
right,
yourself.
yeah, no, I
felt it too.
Yeah.
You know that trick where you reach in your pocket and then you pull out the middle finger? I honestly thought she was just going to turn her fist into it. It was,
but have the ring on her middle finger, just like, here you go. Something with that.
And my kind of my final thoughts on that moment is like as beautiful and poetic and that Celebrimbor's ending and taunting to Sauron was, this was not that. It was just very like I said, very comic booky, very uneloquent, just very it's like almost two different shows. Like
there could have been a battle of the minds here, where there was almost like we got a little bit of that telekinesis conversation later on, but we could have nearly had that be the entire thing, another kind of mental showdown, because we know, as I said, I would have expected Sauron, who's just like discovered his new ability to force choke people and freeze people and things like that. I was like, oh, he'll just use that trick again, and then maybe he'll realize that her mind is more powerful than maybe just those guards, and they'll have this kind of. I think that could have been a cool angle to go down as well. Cool. But I suppose you can't have it all.
Well, I think when she says the door is shut, instead of like a roundhouse kick, like it would have been cool if if that was mid illusion or something, and she said the door is shut, and she like actually shut off her mind, and like the illusions don't work on her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
that'd
like
be cool.
that would have been much more, you know, I think in the vein of what you might get the sense of from the books, like with Osanwe and the mind interchange of mind thought. Yeah.
And perhaps if this scene had taken place mid-season, maybe that's how they would have approached it. But I just felt like we need to have the two main characters go at each other. Now, I wasn't happy with the way she just kind of does a somersault off the cliff and seems to survive. But we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, we already touched on how Sauron he establishes dominance by killing Glug so that the others will fear him. But okay, Matt, we cut away to a scene where the orcs are sacking Eregion, including, you know, the statue of Feanor. They're burning Celebrimbor scrolls, and they capture Gil-galad, Elrond, and Arondir is alive now. I was shocked.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I will say I felt the most connected with Elrond when he's like, "Don't burn the books, please."
Yeah.
That's the lore. Don't burn the lore. I you know, smiled a little bit at that because I felt that was very relatable. But yeah, Arondir was just fine. Like I saw so many people theorizing that that was like his death scene, and that we weren't going to see him anymore. And so for him to just be fine was kind of weird. Like it felt like there was something missing there, or, you know, that we should have seen him bleeding or something. But he's hardly in this episode. For one, he doesn't really get anything much to do. But yeah, he just chucks right along after that stab to the gut.
Yeah, I know, but that's one of the things that I disliked about the episode, just how easily I felt like they wanted their cake and eat it in edit 2, where they had a big emotional scene, and it felt like it was earned and it was paid off in the last episode, and then now it's just like, he's back, so there's no consequences. So
they really like focused on it too. It's not like it was just in passing he gets stabbed and then it's like oh shoot, he got stabbed. It was like they're face to face, he gets stabbed in the stomach and like falls down and everything. It's kind of a big moment in that episode.
Like twice he gets stabbed as well. He gets stabbed with the arrow first, and
the
then
arrow,
stabbed, like run
and the
through
sword.
with Adam's giant sword.
That's the movie way of saying this is death, when it's like proper slow-mo in the gut.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, no matter how many little stabs he's got the big one.
But they have force healing, so I was
right.
like, maybe Gil-galad will force heal him, you know, with the ring, because that's
probably what happened maybe off screen, and I'm just
it might have been a cutscene.
That's what I'm gonna have to think. Like, just if we're gonna try and find a way to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's that okay, then obviously Gil-galad did use the healing powers of the ring again, and then they were like, oh, we have to cut it for time. That's all I can think of. I've always just thought of that now, because when I was watching it, I was just like, what is happening? I was just, part of me was delighted that he's still alive, because I really like him.
Right, yeah, I really like him.
But at the same time, I was like, oh, wait a minute, how?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyways, the dwarves arrive, and that was pretty cool. We get some action with that. But yes, the next scene, Johnny, I want to talk to you about this. Galadriel survives that 200-meter drop or whatever it is, and she's also mortally wounded by an evil god's crown, which kind of acts as like a Morgul blade, because Gil-galad does a whole exposition that her immortal spirit is being drawn to the Shadow Realm, and Elrond finally accepts the ring when he very, very slowly offers to help heal Galadriel. What did you make of this whole scene?
Yeah, so I mean, well, I couldn't really concentrate on the scene when I was just thinking, how is Galadriel alive? What's happening? And also, like, she gets stabbed with the crown and it acts as kind of like a Morgul blade and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But then she falls, like, and plummets to what should be obviously her death. And then they run over and they kind of come across her, and she's on the ground. And they don't even, like, all they do is they go straight to look at the wound where she's been stabbed. There's no, like, check for broken bones, put her in the recovery position. It's just like, okay, straight to that Morgan.
CPR.
So they could have just, like, she could have just got stabbed and then fallen, like on the ground where she was standing, and then they could have come up and found her body in that same way. Like I think that would have been again, it's just the whole thing of, oh, it's going to be visually cool of her falling backwards off this cliff. That's going to be cool. But then wait, we don't want her to die. Oh, well then she's going to be okay. So just that's been my biggest gripe for this episode. I thought some of the visuals were really, really cool, but just they didn't make sense inside the story. So that was the first thing I was focusing on. Going back to the dwarves though for a second, that when they show up, I thought it was funny when Elrond just saw one random dwarf from behind. It was like, Durin! It's like, what are the chances that's Durin? He's like, you have Durin's ass. It's like, how did he, why would he think that was Durin? And then the guy looks around, he's like, no, I'm not Durin. He's like, okay, that's fine. I just thought, I don't know, I had a bit of a chuckle about that. But anyway, going back to Gil-galad and the rest of that scene was fine. I agree with what you said about Elrond. I thought he just was like, I can save her. And then he was like, wait, we can save her. And then he was like, I'm going to put on the ring now, but I'm going to just take my time about that, because, we have all the time in the world. So it was kind of, I've only seen it once. So I'll have to go back and watch it again and enjoy it for a second time without just being like, how is Galadriel alive? What's happening? So, I don't have any other thoughts on that. I can't remember what happened really at the moment.
No, like I as soon as I saw her fall, I was like, oh my goodness, it must be water she lands into, or is it an eagle, or what's going to happen? But I was shocked.
I think she lands in trees. I think that the wide shot as you see her body falling, I think we're meant to think that like the trees broke her fall kind of thing.
Fair,
because I remember now my initial thought when I was watching it and we saw the elves in battle, like looking up and seeing her falling. It's an enormous height she's falling from. So they look up and it's like she's slowly falling down, and I remember thinking, oh, something's going to happen, someone's going to catch her, there's going to be a pool of water, an eagle's going to swoop in, and there's just nothing. And again, so maybe again this is another cutscene that they had to remove.
But anyways, to wrap up the whole Eregion storyline, we've got Sauron. He's got Celebrimbor's hammer, which is pretty cool. He'll probably use that to forge the One Ring. Then we have Gil-galad and the gang, so the Gil gang, I like to call them, have brought Galadriel. Oh, the Galadriel gang. Gil-galad gang.
Gil-gal gang.
So they've brought Galadriel to a sanctuary protected by the Elven Ring. So, Matt, what do we have here?
We have Imladris, also known as Rivendell. They don't say as much, but we know that's what it is.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, we know this stuff. So that's kind of cool. It looked nice. It looked like a nice place to set up shop for Elrond. I was a little confused on whether, so I'm very curious to ask you guys, do you think that they resolved to do the sword or the shield approach? They were debating on whether to do sword or shield approach. And Elrond is like, okay, all these survivors of Eregion, like they're pretty much broken in body or spirit. And as we saw, there's like 40 of them total. And so they're saying, do we do the sword and attack Sauron, or do we do the shield and like set up defenses to try to hold out? And then Galadriel says, oh, we should remember the words of Celebrimbor about light being greater than strength. And I was like, okay, but what's that mean? Like, which one are you choosing? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just me.
No, I'm pretty sure that what would make sense would be the shield approach.
Yes, right?
Because of what we said. But then the last moment of Gil-galad pulling out his sword and like holding it aloft is very much like a call to arms.
He should have had his spear.
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a pure Excalibur moment.
Where's Eyegloss? Yeah,
where's Eyegloss?
Yeah, I
mean, we did get to see him wield it in the last episode.
We did.
For 1.5 seconds. So,
I need like 10 times more Gil-galad with Eyegloss for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like they are going to go with the shield. Just the fact that they've founded this new sanctuary and they're like, right, we're going to protect our, like Johnny mentioned earlier, Vorahil is the only one there that's wearing any armor. So, they're hardly going to attack with a bunch of elven children and women and Vorahil.
Children, yeah.
And by the way, Vorahil, he's the last episode or 2 episodes ago, he was covered in like 5 arrows. Another guy that I thought was getting off his horse to die. And it's just like, he shows up. I suppose every elf is, if you're an elf and you die, you suck because every other one could easily come back. So yeah. Any other last thoughts before we move on to the stranger with Eregion? We good?
No.
So Johnny,
good.
opening scene with the stranger. Yeah. What did you think of his little meeting with the Dark Wizard? And where we get Manwë promise you would come. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I just can't stop focusing on Ciarán Hinds' accent as the Dark Wizard. I love him as an actor. I just don't think it fits with his character of being a wizard. I don't know. Just I enjoyed it, I think, initially, but I think this part he had more dialogue, and I don't know. I just think it sounds a bit weird. But moving past that, I mean, it was obvious that we were going to get that he is Gandalf, and I'm just hoping that this isn't saying. I hope they're not going to say he is Sauron of this Dark Wizard, because that really wouldn't make any sense. Then, like, going forward, as in, why would Gandalf ever trust Sauron ever again? And why would he be like, oh, he should be the leader of the White Council? Yeah, that's fine. I don't have any arguments with that. So hopefully he is going to be one of the Blue Wizards, and that's what we're going to get. Now, I know I heard Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor, talking about the like Galadriel thing, or sorry, the Gandalf thing before. This is a few weeks back, and I remember him saying, I don't care if at the end of the season they tell us that he is Galadriel, I keep saying Galadriel, he is Gandalf and this is Saruman. He was like, I don't care if that's what the reveal that we get. He's like, his name could be Jimbo for all I care. He is a Blue Wizard and they are Blue Wizards, because we're getting the story of the Blue Wizards. Because we're getting two wizards that are going off into the east, into the lands of Rhûn, and they are, one of them is setting up a cult and is evil, and the other one is, finding his own way. So he basically said this is the closest thing we're ever going to get to an adaptation of the two Blue Wizards and their story. So if they want to do that, and then at the end say, oh, by the way, now he's going to also be Gandalf. He's like, oh, I'm just going to think of it that way. And I was like, if I just think about it that way, I don't get so mad. And I'm like, okay, well, we could have been given a Blue Wizard, but in the end, maybe we kind of were. And at the same time, they're like, okay, you've had your Blue Wizard in season 2. Now season 3 onwards, he's going to be Gandalf. It's like, okay, fine. We'll let you have Gandalf in your series. But yeah, I can't remember what the question was. Like, I just went on a bit of a tangent there.
No, that's fine. Like, Matt, did you think that... I think I was expecting some grand thing of like two wizards finally meeting each other. That it's been kind of prophesied almost throughout the season. What did you make of their meeting?
Yeah, it came off to me very like Saruman, Gandalf in the book in Fellowship of the Ring, because like in the movie he just makes the pitch, we should join with Sauron. We should join with Sauron. It's, it would be wise, my friend, but in the books, he initially says, oh, we should join this power that's going to win. And then he says, but if we got the ring, we could be the power, kind of thing. And that's kind of where what this reminded me of. It's like, oh, well, let's overthrow Sauron and we'll take his place. And in the books, Gandalf makes the point, like, only one person can wield the ring at a time. So like, you're saying we, but you mean you. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I got from that, was that it was kind of inspired by that moment. And I could also go on a totally a tangent that you didn't ask for about it being Gandalf as well, but I'll try to refrain.
Don't refrain. Go ahead.
Well, I feel like these kind of conversations come up nearly every week with us. We're like, so back to the stranger. Is it Gandalf? Yeah, but fire ahead if you want. Well, one thing I wanted to point out, he does call him old friend, which I thought was Saruman-esque, but also kind of like
be wise.
But I thought it was like Palpatine vibes as well, like my old
little
friend.
Green friend.
Yeah. My little green. Yeah, very slow when he gives that line. But we obviously have the Gaudrum leader Brank is there with Poppy and Nori. He says, my people were once kings, wizard, and then he's dead. He's stone dead. We also get the stranger. He calls Nori and Poppy my dear friends. So I was like, oh, Gandalf again, Gandalf. But also, Matt, I want to hear your thoughts on the line where is it? Yeah, the stranger says, "You pity him whose blade was at your throat." Oh, sorry, that's what the Dark Wizard says.
Yeah.
You pity him whose blade was at your throat, and Nori says, "Yes." I thought that
Yeah.
was nice. What did
Yeah.
you make of this?
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of, Frodo's pity for Saruman in the Scouring of the Shire. That's one of my things, that there's a few adaptations actually. I always bring up Harry Potter as the other one where pity at the very end is like a big thing, and they get cut out from movies and from adaptations a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a powerful message to have, pity for someone that you've been an enemy with, when it comes down to the very end. I don't think it didn't land as well for me as I think, seeing something like the Scouring of the Shire play out. Like there wasn't enough history between the characters for that to really land very, very emphatically for me, because it was just kind of like, oh, it's this random guy who wears a gold mask. There wasn't this long like history of evil. Like he comes around and he like slaps the one lady, and that's about it. It was for his interaction with the hobbits. So
it's not like where Saruman is just constantly being a menace and taking
and
over
tries
the Shire
to kill
and
him
then
multiple
tries
times.
To stab him. Well, does stab him, I suppose.
Yeah, he does.
If it weren't for Frodo, just never takes off his mithril shirt. But and then even after all of that, still saying no, let him go, don't kill him. That's a really. I didn't even think about that. I thought about just like the whole on-screen Gandalf and a hobbit talking about pity against a creature. So I thought that's what they were trying to mirror. But I think I like yours more, of the Scouring of the Shire. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I thought that was you're right, actually. It wasn't as grand as it could have been, because it was kind of almost a throwaway line, but it was, I think everyone else that's just watching this, that isn't a fan of the books or the movies, they wouldn't even pick up on it. But I was like, oh, that was a nice little line there. But yeah, we get to see the stranger has Jedi powers when he's lifting the rocks, which is interesting. And then we cut to the Harfoots are rebuilding the Schmeals as Poppy has a nice little speech. And then everyone says goodbye to Gandalf. But yeah, anyways, we get to see old Tom again. And the stranger says, I was meant to choose friendship over power. I was meant to find this, when he's talking about his staff. Now, Matt, I'm glad we got this line, because I think a lot of us didn't like Tom's reusing of the line. Some of us who live may deserve to die, or whatever. Did you think that this helped, or did you think that this kind of solved that issue?
No, not for me anyway. I still didn't like it. It felt like a shallow repurposing of the line, and it falls into the prequelitis problem, where it's people are just repeating the same lines of dialogue throughout the centuries and everything, and everything has an origin. Like, not everything has to have an origin, and Gandalf's most famous speech does not need an origin story. Like, Gandalf can just be wise and come up with that on his own. He doesn't need to tweak Tom Bombadil's words that when he said it meant the opposite. So yeah, no, it did. I wouldn't say, like, rewatching episode 4, I would still hate that moment.
Yeah, true. But at least Tom Bombadil doesn't mean the opposite.
Oh yeah, no, and like it was pretty obvious, I think, that he was setting him up to make the right decision.
Sure.
But yeah, I think for all my qualms about it being Gandalf and not making sense that it is Gandalf, the small moment where Gandalf and Tom Bombadil just chill in his hut and sing the little song, I'm like, I like that. Like, that warms my heart, seeing Gandalf and Tom Bombadil just hanging out singing the Tom Bombadil song. I'm like, that's a great moment, self-contained, like separate from my thoughts on Gandalf being the wizard in this show. That's a great moment.
Maybe that song went on for a couple of years.
I was just going to say, doesn't Gandalf talk to Tom Bombadil for like 2 full years in the book?
2 full years, yeah. I think my theory is, like, you don't need any more wizard story. Like, you can cut out the hobbits, you can cut out the wizard, and like just imply that Tom and Gandalf sang for like the next 2,500 years until the wizards are supposed to show up. Maybe he helps him move. Maybe he like helps him move back to the old forest, and it's like, I'll help you carry your stuff. Let's pack it up and let's journey on to the old forest.
And
That'll be great.
then again, there's obviously another callback when Gandalf says, Gandalf, that's what they will call me, kind of like, what they used to call me. And of course, we never, I don't know, did we mention it, but the callback to Lord of the Rings when the Balrog wraps his whip around Durin's leg and pulls him down. So that was, it's almost scene for scene. But we can park that there, move on to Numenor if we're still good for time. The last two sections are only short. So
one more mention. Sorry, I have something that I've written down where the Dark Wizard just mentions Manwë, which was cool as well. And he's like, Manwë promised that you would come. I just had to mention that because I thought that was cool. Any of these little like mentions where they're putting like in last week's episode with Melian as well, I was like, oh yeah, that's nice.
You can tell which Valar are named in the Lord of the Rings because it's the ones that they name drop in the show. Like that's why they never say they say Aule a lot. They say Manwë from time to time, but they never say Ulmo. Like that's the names that aren't there. Yeah,
sure,
by omission. But
very true.
It's always nice to get a Valar
they don't have the rights to. They don't have the rights to the word Maya or Maiar either,
right?
As well.
Yeah,
so
it doesn't appear.
Last week in our episode, I got quite annoyed at how they were saying Melian of the Valar, and I was like, "It's not correct. I'm sorry."
Yeah. So So quick thing on that, because I looked into this because I was very curious about that phrasing. I was like, are they upgrading her to Valar status? Because that's odd, But I did notice that when she is mentioned, she's only mentioned once in Lord of the Rings, and she is mentioned as Melian of the people of the Valar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, the charitable reading there is that it's of the Valar in the sense that she is a servant to the Valar, as all Maiar are.
That's exactly sense. Somebody commented under our last YouTube video saying something like this, like they couldn't even get it right, and I put that quote in saying, look, the show just dropped a couple of words, but it kind of means the same thing. Do you know?
Kinda.
We leave it in the kinda bracket.
Yeah,
we'll leave it in
because I had the same like at first I was like, of the Valar, what the, like, she's not a Valar, what is
But, I mean semantics, but we'll move on.
Well, it was nice to hear her mentioned last week, and for me it was nice to hear just Manwë just doing his little bits and pieces as well. Like when Círdan earlier on mentioned how there's a scar in the earth that not even Manwë knows how deep it is when they were going to throw the rings in. So any of those little mentions of the Valar is great.
Name drops are great when they're done right, and if they organically throw them in when it makes sense, then I'm happy with it. But anyways, we have Numenor, and we get a shot of Nimloth, the tree.
It's a great shot.
Then it is a great shot. Then we get the leaders of the faithful. They're all gathered, and Ar-Pharazôn is pinning Miriel's bewitching of the sea on her allegiance with Sauron. So again, this is another thing where I wasn't sure if there's something that I'm not picking up. But Matt, I just wanted to ask you, was it what is written on this parchment that changes everyone's mind?
I don't know. I wondered the same thing. I thought, like, I know Pharazôn looked in the Palantir, and he seemed to learn that Halbrand was Sauron from that. And so I'm like, what, did he just write it? Like, hey, Halbrand is Sauron, we got played. And then, the guy opens it. Oh, Sauron, what? And, and then it's like, all it's kind of like the Revenge of the Sith things, like all Jedi are now an enemy of the Republic, and it's like, is that
it's propaganda? Is it?
I'm like is this paper 66. Enough? Is this paper enough for you to order 66 the faithful right now? It's kind of flimsy. Like, this is like a trust me bro kind of thing to round up a good size of the population.
Yeah, all the faithful are just declared traitors of Westernesse. It was cool that we got the name drop of Westernesse, which would be kind of like the Westron name or the English name of Numenor. So again, another nice little name drop. But Johnny, I just want to ask you about this. We have the leaves of the Nimloth then fall. We see the Numenorian soldiers seek out the faithful. Éowyn hides Elendil. who goes straight to Miriel, talking of leaving to go to the west of Numenor, where his son Eregion is amongst other faithful. But the big kind of cool scene that we didn't really get any build up to, but Miriel wants to go down with the sinking ship, but she offers Elendil a new blade. So, Johnny, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was class to see Narsil on screen. I loved the not the build to it because it wasn't much of a huge build. Well, my first thought was, how does she know where she is in the room and that Narsil is there beside her? I'm always just like, does she know exactly where she is and her orientation? How is it? But she was like, this is the sword. It's called Narsil. It's the White Flame. And as soon as he picks it up and he like unsheathes the sword in the similar manner that Aragorn does in the tent with Elrond, I was like, yeah, I've gotten, of all the kind of little callbacks and remember this is one of the ones where I was like, I don't mind this at all. I thought he just looked so kingly in that moment. And I thought that was really, really well done. I enjoyed it a lot. But I'm going to have to give a shout out to what you mentioned already. That shot of the leaves coming off the Nimloth and the swell. I just wrote music in capital letters because I think that's been one of the best parts of Numenor this season. Because Numenor, I think it's been lagging a little bit behind. And I think just the music is just the thing that really uplifts Numenor all the time. I think that the theme is so powerful. It's so good. And even in this episode, there was a few moments where that, and also I heard Galadriel's theme, both have been shifted into minors at points where it just, again, Bear McCreary is just, I give him a shout out nearly every episode because I think he's absolutely smashing it this season again.
Yeah.
And even some of the new themes as well that we do get.
Yeah, the rune one. Yeah, I really like the rune
one. Is class. Yeah, it's really, really good. So that was, for me, one of these things, one of the best parts of Numenor this season. And again, in this scene, I loved the opening shot of the Nimloth with the setting sun behind it, and then also this one where we saw the leaves really start to, like, the Valar are just like, guys, this is really not what you're supposed to be doing right now. Stop it. But yeah, it makes for great visuals. In this case, it's one of those times where the visuals are great and it also is actually lining up with the story, so that's good.
Matt, I just had two questions for you on the sword as well, because first of all, she says, reclaim your lordship / destiny. So question one is, did you like the inclusion of destiny? And question two, am I stupid, or is the White Flame a thing? I didn't know that was the name for Narsil.
Yeah, Narsil. I forget the etymology right off the top of my head, but yeah, gosh. Yeah.
Well, Sil would be like Silmarillion, like so.
It translates. It's like
light,
Nar. It's Nar, and Thil is like the roots. So
like
in one of them, I've got it because I wrote it down for my breakdown. Yeah. So Nar is fire and Thil is white light.
Deadly.
So yeah. I've been like pretty hard on this show when it comes to the callbacks because I feel so many of them are very ham-fisted in and forced, and like the Tom Bombadil thing, for example, was my least favorite. And there's all these little callbacks. Some of them are just to the movies, even they're not even like book callbacks, so it's very obvious that they're for a show that doesn't want to be compared to the films, they remind us of the films an awful lot, and it almost never lands for me. But this is one where I don't mind it, and I actually like it because Elendil and Aragorn are tied together in a unique way that a lot of these characters are not from story to story. But Aragorn is the culmination. He's like the redemption of their entire line and a return to the glory of Elendil. So having these moments that connect those two characters, I don't mind it at all. It wasn't shot for shot, and I liked how and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but as the sword passes by, you get like white reflected light off the blade, and there's such poetic language around these swords in the films where it's described as a a white flame, like when they're fighting with it. And I'm like, how do you adapt that? Like it's like
Sure.
they wielded the sword like a flame, a blade of flame. And it's like, you can't actually do like the Witch King thing and have it actually be a flame. But so that was kind of a cool little nod to like hammer home the white flame thing.
You
And
need it to be anime where they have that like light
right.
kind of coming down the sword. They always hold the sword and they're
Oh
like
yeah.
in
And it goes
like a
shing.
static,
Yeah.
and it goes shring.
Yeah. For me, the only thing I thought, would be odd is if you had no familiarity with those films, like, would you, and even within the show, like, why is this a momentous occasion for Narsil? Like, here is Narsil, reclaim your lordship. It's like, we haven't really talked about him not embracing like the lordship of Andunier. And we definitely haven't talked about Narsil. Like, it was an Easter egg in season 1. So why is this a music swelling, sword drawing epic moment? And it's one of those where it's like, it's definitely a very intentional moment for people who've seen those movies.
Of
But
course.
if you're going in cold and this is your first Lord of the Rings thing, you're probably thinking, why is this sword so important?
Sure.
Yeah.
When you were just talking there about the aligning of the two characters as well, of
Yeah.
Elendil and Aragorn, I'm just thinking that this is the person who Aragorn shouts his name as he's like charging into battle and carrying this sword. So it's like it fits and it works, and there is that.
It makes total sense to connect these two characters, and that's why, and I hope that when the time comes and the fall of Numenor happens, and Elendil steps onto the shores of Middle Earth for the first time, knowing that is where he is going to live now, that he uses the words that Aragorn uses as his coronation song. Like, that's where, Vigo and Peter Jackson pulled that from. Those are the first words Elendil says when he comes to Middle Earth. Yeah. So like the et erarelo utuvien sinome maruvan, that whole thing is literally the words that Elendil says when he comes to Middle Earth, and says like, here, it translates to like, here I will dwell, me and my heirs, until the end of days, or something like that. So I hope he says that. And I, like, that would be an instance where 100%, like, by all means, reference the movies, because it makes sense. It connects those characters, and that's a moment that belongs to Elendil anyway. So like, go for it.
That will be deadly, and here's hoping. But basically, that's pretty much all with Numenor. We obviously see Miriel is arrested in a later flashback, and Elendil flees the city of Armenelos, just like it was foreseen. But Matt, we know you're a busy man. Before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about what was your worst moment of the episode, and I wanted to ask you that first, so then we can finish on a positive and ask what was your best moment. So, worst moment first.
Oh gosh. See, now I'm like, I always blend episodes together too, and like I start to like, wait, was that in this episode or was that last episode? Okay, so I think decision-wise, the Gandalf thing really still kind of bugs me, and it's going to take me a little bit to get over the fact that he's Gandalf. I mean, eventually it'll be like, okay, well, he's Gandalf now. Can't do anything about it. So hopefully we get some cool early Gandalf adventures in the East, I think for me, moments that were kind of built up to be significant moments, like Poppy giving the very, very much like the there's some good in this world speech was just kind of like, I don't know. I had it written down at one point, like word for word, and I was like, it just feels like word salad. Like, it's just, we're just saying words here. You're just speaking in platitudes. Like, total contrast to Celebrimbor's, remember the light thing, which I thought was really nice.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I thought that was beautiful. And then this just felt like very generic speech, and I think season 1 had a lot of those like generic speeches. Season 2 didn't have nearly as many, which was great. But that was one that felt kind of generic to me. But yeah, I think other than that, my biggest drawbacks are just kind of those issues that have plagued the show a little bit. So there's that, and then there's like the scale stuff. I think really needs hammering out going forward. And probably the Marvel moments, like I said. those
The bad
those
Marvel
ones I was
moments.
just like, yeah, I was just like, ah, that's not nearly as good as Celebrimbor.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about your best moment of this episode?
So I already said like my favorite episode across both seasons, but Celebrimbor's death scene,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
hands down, like that. I think the two Charlies, Charlie Vickers, Charles Edwards, were the MVPs of this season for sure. Anatar Celebrimbor was pretty much every episode that they're in, that they're the best part of the episode. And I think there might have been one episode where they weren't in, and it was like one of the worst of the season because
Yeah.
they carried the season, I think.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think, you know, it continues to be one of those shows where there's good and bad, and it's you know, I hope that one day it can reach that full potential, you know, and just be one of those shows that I'm just like, yep, this is all of this is just a banger. But it's still kind of like a bit of a mixture for me. So I was really glad though to get that moment of Celebrimbor and to feel like his death was done justice was a big plus for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Obviously, guys, we're gonna myself and Johnny will give our best and worst moments, but first we have to talk about Pelargir, which everyone is dying to hear about. But we can now say goodbye to Matt. Thank you so much for coming on and educating us. Yes, thank you so much. It's been great having you on. We'll definitely get you back again.
It's been so much fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
No
Appreciate
problem. No problem. Look, be well and Namarie.
Namarie.
Awesome.
There we go.
So great to have Matt on, and we got him on for all the best parts because all the meatier fun stuff was in.
I thought we were finished.
No, we have a little bit left to go. So we have Pelargir. Also, I wanted to give a little note as well on the sword Narsil. So I have written down here the sword was forged during the first age by the dwarven smith Telkar of Nogrod. Its knife mate was Angrist, so people might know that. A lot of swords in the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings and whatever, they're usually made with like a mate or another sword, which is quite cool, like a little brother. And in the second age, the sword was presumably taken to Numenor, where it eventually became the property of the lords of Andúnie. Nothing is known of Narsil's owner in this time, save that the sword eventually passed to Elendil. So it's quite lore accurate, like that Miriel could easily have given the sword to Elendil. So I just wanted to add that little note in. But Johnny, any other notes before we move on to Pelargir?
From Numenor?
From Numenor, yeah.
The only final thing I was going to say was that Miriel gives a quote at one point where Elendil is like, come on, we both have to go. And she says, one does not need eyes to lead in the dark. And I was a bit confused as to what that means. So I was going to ask you, what do you think it means?
Sorry, Miriel says that, but she's saying that as she's also saying, but I'm not coming. So I thought that was...
yeah, like, I mean, I thought initially she was saying... I thought she was saying it's a bad idea to leave, and I'm not going to go there because I'll be leading in the dark, and I don't even need eyes to lead in the dark, so you won't be able to lead there either, because I don't know, I was just confused in general. I was like,
I feel like she could have said this as not a blind woman and it would have actually made more sense, but the fact that she's blind, I'm like, is there like a double meaning to this? And I didn't get it. I feel like somebody wrote that line down and was like, that'll be good, we mentioned blindness in this line. So
okay, right, it's not just that there was a very obvious meaning that I'm missing or something, is it?
No, well, look, let's ring Matt and see what he thinks. Hang on, I got him back here. 1 second, Matt. Hello. I don't know.
You.
I didn't think there was much to that line really. I just thought it's like another excuse for the writers to put the word blind in something that Miriel says.
Fair enough.
Or dark or vision or something like that.
Not needing eyes, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, Pelargir. We have Theo and Isildur. I don't have many notes on this because it just didn't interest me that much. So let's just I have four things that I can ask you about. But Theo and Isildur, they share an touching embrace when they're talking about dead mothers and stuff. Before which presumably he becomes the king of the dead. Theo. It's something that we've talked about, hypothesized on this podcast before. And Isildur becomes a homewrecker, so not too sure what to think about that. So, what are your thoughts on this?
My first thoughts regarding Theo and Isildur on screen together, I thought Theo has not annoyed me as much this season as he did last season.
Because he's barely there.
I know, maybe that's the reason. But I think in the very few times that we've actually seen him, I've thought he's done okay. He's done better. I think he's a better actor now than he was 2 years ago. And I mean, he was very, very young 2 years ago, I suppose. So that would make sense. And I shouldn't be a harsh critic on such a young actor. But I definitely think if he's so young and he's just really like learning his chops, he probably shouldn't have been given so much screen time as he was last season. I think maybe that was an oversight by the directors, maybe. But so I've enjoyed his scenes a little bit more this season. Short though they have been. And maybe snappy, that's maybe another thing that they should just keep doing. Keep him, use him sparingly, and then use him only in situations where it would make sense. If he does go on to become the king of the dead, that would be cool. I've said that before. I'd like to see someone who we've seen as like a young child growing up, and we're kind of like we'll feel for him, and then we watch his fall into madness and into just following the dark path, I suppose. But moving on to then his kiss, Isildur's kiss with, I don't remember her name.
Estrid,
yes. I don't know how I feel about it, where she's like, oh, my future husband is just outside there and he's currently building our house and they could have been like, he's a jerk and I don't like him and I'm being forced into this. But he's like completely in love with this girl and he's like, this cornerstone is a representation of our love. And I was like, oh man, this is really making me feel like I don't like what they're doing here. And
why is she betrothed at all? Like, why does that doesn't help the plot? It just makes me think Isildur is a homewrecker and she's an asshole. Like I don't get it. I thought it was going to service the plot somehow, but
well, what would have been really good is if they had been like, okay, we're finally getting together, we finally confess our love for each other, and then Kemen comes in and is like, no, she can't come, and so that's why they're separated. But having the whole we can't be together initially because I have a fiance just didn't help anything at all, really. I mean, they could have even gotten together in that episode when they met the Ents, and then like now be like boyfriend and girlfriend, and then suddenly it's like, oh, you need to be separated because she's not allowed to come to Numenor and you have to come back because you're one of the faithful and we're not here to rescue you, you're actually wanted for treason. So that could have been a good angle to go with. And I agree, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel like it was a nice thing for our hero to be like, oh, look at how cute they are, where she's sneaking off and he's the other man. And it's not like in those things where but she's been forced into a marriage that she doesn't want, and it's with a person who is completely unloving and uncaring and whatever. It's like, no, this guy seems, as she said, I mistook his kindness for love. So she's admitting he's a really kind person as well. And even after she basically just in front of the whole town says, oh, I'm leaving him for Isildur, who I've only known for a couple of days. Like he must be so embarrassed, and then he's just like, oh, I'll take her back, it's fine. So he's like really understanding and kind, we've been told, and he loves her so much, and he's still so I don't know if that was the right move.
They could have come at it from the angle where she never mentions the betrothed. I always struggle with that word. And then
that's why I say fiance or future husband.
And her and Isildur kiss, and then later we find out, oh, she's actually betrothed to someone else. That would have been, maybe from a plot perspective, I think that would have been more interesting, but I just don't know how this serviced the plot. But anyways, there was a question here. It was like one of the only questions I had written beside it, Matt ? Because like I thought this could be good for him. But like I don't know if you have any idea on this, but like Estrid, you mentioned the cornerstone. Estrid mentioned that they asked the gods to keep their love as strong as their home. And I was doing a quick, I was preparing for this for a long time, and I did a quick Google search to try and find out what the people of Pelargir, or just like regular people of Middle Earth, like do they believe or worship in gods, or I don't know. It just kind of caught me off guard where I heard the word gods, and I was like, oh, they?
I agree.
Did you get that?
I focused on that word as well, and I thought that she was going to go down some angle like, this is the reason I want to leave him, because his gods are the old gods, not the new, or whatever, you know.
The gods of tits and wine.
So I thought it was going to be something like that, and I was looking the whole time for, give me a reason to give this the okay, this new relationship, for her to leave her future husband, her betrothed, and I was like, give me a reason. Oh, he's worshipping these evil gods or something. Is that what it's going to be? But I don't know. It didn't go any further with it. So then, I mean, I've only watched the episode once, so I did focus on that word when it happened. But then I kind of forgot about it because they didn't bring it up. They didn't bring it any further. So yeah, I can't answer your question either. Maybe again, should have asked Matt.
Yeah, no, it was just one of those things where I kind of felt like, oh, they're just putting this line in because that's probably what you do in a like a fantasy show. You talk about the gods, and like no one actually stopped and thought about it. It actually reminded me of, I don't know, was it the last episode or 2 episodes ago? But Narvi came. Oh, I think it was when Narvi had a big slash in his head, and he was talking to Durin, and he was like, he talks about Durin's father, and he says he's cutting down men, or he's cutting down my men. And I was like, why don't you say dwarf? Because they always say like, yeah, there's good dwarves down there, but he says like he's cutting down my men. And I thought that was kind of weird. Oh. Yeah, I forgot to bring it up in that breakdown, but I just thought it was a complete oversight where someone was just writing the line and said like, oh, I've got men down there.
That's exactly, I say that's exactly what it was. It's an oversight. They just didn't, they were writing the script, and it went through all the levels and the checks, and people were like, oh yeah, of course he's attacking my men, or whatever. But it's like, a dwarf would never say he's one of my men.
Yeah, it was jarring to me.
Yeah.
But anyways, guys, comment below if you think that's a weird one. But Johnny, then what did you make of this whole arrival of Kemen to Pelargir? He wants to make a fortress for his soldiers, and the reunion of Kemen and Isildur as well. Yeah, what did you make of this whole thing?
It was probably maybe Kemen's not his worst kind of appearances on screen. I thought it was actually quite good. I thought he's kind of starting to warm up to this role that he's been given, and he kind of feels like he knows what to say in these moments now. And I thought he was kind of clever at the beginning when he first saw me. He was like, oh my God, you're alive. Your sister's going to be so happy, mentioning his sister, kind of getting him on side. Also saying like, oh, I never gave up hope that we wouldn't find you. So just like, I thought that was just very clever when he first set out, and then knowing what to do when he was kind of going, no, you're not, she's not allowed on the boat. And by the way, your father is wanted for treason, and Muriel is no longer the queen, and my father is.
And I would have killed the old fool if it were up to me.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's about to attack him, and he's like, oh, maybe we should eat your horse. And it's like, whoa, that is way past the line. Yeah. So I think it was just like, we've mentioned this before, and I think it's still true. The fact that Kemen, we used to hate him just because he was a nothing character, and lots of the same with Eregion, and they were just, and maybe same with like some of the other characters that were just like, oh, they're just taking up time, and I want to get back to where the story is actually happening. Mm-hmm. Now we hate him because he's completing his task as an actor, which is doing things which are really, really just horrible and evil, and he's pushing that plot along nicely. So I think he's doing a good job, the actor is. I just wish that the actor was a little bit more imposing. I think it'd be cool if he was just a bit more, well, maybe it's even
he's
cooler
more like
a kind of weaselly kind of
like Grima, or like the Alfred from The Hobbit, just kind of got no real power, and they're clutching on to the power of his actual lineage.
Physical power, but he has all the power of like the muscle behind him, I suppose.
Yeah, but he doesn't speak well. Not the actor, but the character. Like, he just kind of he has no decorum. He comes in, and he goes, "Oh, we need to get rid of this temple. We need to make room for the aqueducts." Or he comes into this like Pelargir, and he's like, "Yes, we should set up a watchtower here." And like he doesn't care about the people
What
around.
was the deal with them? Like when he first arrived, he's like doing city planning, and they were like, "This is Theo, son of Bronwyn," and he's just like, "Yeah, okay." And they're like, "No,
he
no,
cared
you
as
didn't
much
hear
as
us.
we did.
You didn't hear us. He is the son of Bronwyn." I thought he was gonna be like, "Who's Bronwyn?" Like, as in, how would he know who Bronwyn is?
I didn't get that either. I kind of thought, was Bronwyn, when she died, was she supposed to be like the Lord of Pelargir, and then she was also like, she posted that in her Facebook status or something, like, Lord of Pelargir, if you don't know who I am, then you're an idiot. So
I assume the idea is just to kind of make us feel like, okay, the people in this town, they hold her in really, really high regard, and so we should know that maybe going forward. But at the time I was like, this is so goofy and like really, I don't know.
I just liked how Kemen's reaction was the same as all of ours. It's just like, okay. And then he says it again. He's like, "And who are you?" Like, I don't care.
Yeah, I've never like felt so seen by Kemen, represented by Kemen in the show.
So I suppose the final thing, Kemen mentions about cutting down trees, and then immediately Isildur and Theo kind of look at each other as if, oh God, this is awkward. Like, we're friends with the trees now. Like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, the man arriving over from Numenor. Look, all we're asking for is a bit of wood. Like, they're just trees. Surely you can even do it. We like the trees over here. We won't be cutting them down. It's like, you guys are completely useless.
Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that was kind of silly, because I was like, what did they expect to never be able to cut down wood now for the rest of their lives just because they met two Ents? I don't know. But yeah, Isildur, he leaves a broken-hearted Estrid, and yeah, I didn't really care about this that much, and I don't know. I didn't care about it. I thought like we needed more Numenor in this season. Maybe you and I will do a whole season review in a later episode sometime. But yeah, we're just breaking down the episode on a surface level for the time being. But I suppose we can get into our best and worst moments. So, sure. Johnny, start with your worst moment of the episode.
My worst moment was, there's two different kind of things. One of them could possibly be the reveal that the stranger finally is Gandalf, but I think we kind of knew that was coming for a while. I think my hope was mere and meager of him becoming blue. Did you say the hope was blue?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to quote Gil-galad and Elrond when they were saying, "Hope is never mere, even when it is meager." My hope was pretty mere and meager at the same time of him actually becoming a blue wizard. But as I said, I listened to the Tolkien professor a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about that, and I was like, "Oh, that makes me feel a little bit better that he can have the name Gandalf." But what we actually got to see on screen this season play out was the role of the two blue wizards going out to the east, going out to the lands of Rune. So I'm like, okay, well, I suppose we got that, and that's quite nice. That was one moment, but I'd say for me, the worst thing of this episode was the fact that some people just are impervious to death and to injury, and nobody else seems to comment about or just comment on it or even just kind of bring it up. So the two main moments are Arondir showing back up. For one part of me, I've already said this, for one part of me, I was really, really happy to see him. But the second part, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And then the same thing with Galadriel just falling off a cliff after being stabbed. And then they all run over and they're like, "Oh, look, she's been stabbed. Let's quickly tend to that wound and not worry about all the broken bones she must have in her body from that, half a mile cliff fall that she's just come off."
Yeah.
So that's probably it. There was a few other things, but that's the first thing that's coming to me. So I'm going to give it to that. How about you?
Right. That's funny. My worst moment was actually the resurrection of all Arondir, Galadriel, and Vorahil as well. Like, it's just I don't know why.
I don't remember Vorahil having getting stabbed.
So much. No, he basically at the end of episode 6 when Elrond, or no, sorry, the end of the episode 7, the most recent episode, he looks to the north and sees the sun shine, and he's like, "Look, the dwarves are coming," and it's Vorahil coming down with like 10 arrows in him. And he's like,
he's the messenger, is it?
Durin has turned his forces around. And he gets off the horse, and I was like, that's him dead.
So he was the scout that had been sent out.
Yeah. So yeah, like just seeing
again,
this kind of stuff.
Every little thing, it has to be one of the actors that we've already seen who's already had speaking lines. It's like, okay, who's going to be the scout that we send out the messenger to go and find out what the dwarves are doing? Vorahil, let's get him, and let's have him be the one that speaks when we're entering the Barrow Downs. When he was the very cocky dwarf in that scene, if I remember correctly.
Cocky
he was
elf.
Cocky elf when they were going into the Barrow Downs and they were about to face off with the Barrow.
It's the one with 2 little blades. He's cool, yeah. Like, I think he's a cool character. I think
he looks actor, like a cool elf.
He looks good as well. But like, there was no need. When he died, I was like, we had a little bit of a connection with him. It was fun while it lasted, and he had 2 cool knives. That's great. Sad to see him go. But then, like, he's just there at the end, like, cheering. And I'm like, why? Like, did they just not have enough extras? Or, like, they just...
Oh, man, I went back and watched that scene. That was... I didn't have time to watch this episode twice. Because I just basically
you just watched that scene work 20 times.
But I watched that scene a couple of times back just to double check. I was like, I'm pretty sure I've seen that guy loads of times. It was on 5 separate shots we got to see Vorahil. And I was like, that's too many. It's like, it doesn't make sense that you would have that one little thing. And it wasn't like there was loads of other shots. It was like there was one small area where they were like standing on different levels of rocks and bits of water were flowing around, and he was just like there all the time. So yeah.
But anyways, that was the worst moment for me, seeing those people all surviving, because like even with Galadriel, like we know she survives, but like it suspends our belief, because I kind of feel I sat down after the episode and I was like, well, why do we just assume that Durin the Third dies with the Balrog? Like, all he did was like clash an axe, but we saw Galadriel. Like, you know, if I showed you that scene to some random person, then I showed like someone getting stabbed in like the heart by a Morgul blade and then falling off a cliff, and I just showed someone those 2 scenes, I'm like, who do you think survives out of these 2? You'd be like, well, obviously the really cool scene with the guy fighting the big beast. It just doesn't make any sense. So I kind of feel like if you don't see someone being beheaded on screen, or like properly the light fading from their eyes, then they're not dead. Like Arondir as well. I was like, that was a pretty good death, but we didn't see him go like, ugh. So I don't believe he's dead.
Yeah, but I mean, I definitely didn't expect him just to show up and be like, I'm completely fine. I'm still doing flips and shooting arrows like nothing's happened. So that's why I put that down as my worst.
At least in season 1, when Bronwyn, when they did the fake out cop out thing with her, at least she shows up on death's door, like completely dying, and she's like, you know, it needs to be medicated for an episode or 2. But
then do you remember? Then she showed up and she was standing, and she remember when Theo.
But they gave her a little bit longer to heal, which is what I mean.
Maybe, yeah. Even then, I was still unsatisfied. I was still like, she shouldn't be standing up like a few hours after having gotten shot by a few arrows and surviving a volcanic eruption. And Theo was like, is this dead body my mother? And he's like, look, and then we just hear Theo, and he just turns on and she's like standing up. It's like, she probably should be able to walk for a couple of weeks, you know. Anyway, we'll move on.
But anyway,
I'm going to talk about that.
On to the positive stuff now. So what was your best moment from the episode?
Again, there were equally, like there were a few negatives. There were a few positives in this one. For me,
but what was
there were
best?
Positives. The best. I'm going to give my best to the dwarves, and specifically, I loved the little heartfelt conversation between the 2 Durins, where they were talking about when I was a wee lad and we used to arm wrestle and you'd let me win. And then he was like, and then you slammed my hand down. And I was like, oh no, this is bad. And he's like, oh no, but I didn't let you win. That was you getting stronger. And I loved that. That was really, really nice. So I think that was, now I was going to say my best moment. Sorry, I should have prefaced this by saying my best moment was probably Celebrimbor dying, but just to kind of, for once in this entire season, try to not give it to Celebrimbor and Anatar. I'm going to try and give it to the dwarves and say that scene was class. And then visually, just during his death when he's charging and diving into the Balrog, that was so cool. I know it was a little bit Marvel, but I was like, wow, that was really impactful. and it was just
You can't take all the moments. You got to give me at least one to work with.
I'm sorry.
My best moments. First of all, I'm going to give you 8 moments that I thought were good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
well,
my bad.
I chose 1 because that was the assignment. And funnily enough,
I like to cheat and win.
well, maybe we should ask me first.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, no, I chose again, same as you, Dwarves. I went for the stunning visuals of the Balrog versus King Doran. I thought that whole, the speech was incredible. And I love that dying speech from King Doran. I thought that was amazing. But just like, I feel like they just spent all their budget on this Balrog shot because I thought the whole thing was incredible and the way he moved, and I thought he almost looked better than Peter Jackson's. If I don't know, am I allowed to say that? It looked good.
No, I would say so. Yeah, visually, because I mean, look, they're using like 20 years more evolved and more advanced technologies to be able to create this, and I agree that the budget looks like it was pumped into those shots, and it was just stunning. I thought it was incredible, and I also think it looked way better. The final result, I've said this about a few things this season, the final result and within the context of the episode fit so much better than what we saw in the trailer. I thought the trailer, undersold it, really.
Well, I was just going to say as well, like I thought like the smoky wings as well, because we mentioned it briefly on this episode here, but if people don't know, there's a big argument about Balrogs having wings, and it's because there's kind of it's kind of like a misleading line in the book to say wing-like shadows like grew around him, and I think there's a mention of wingspan as well. So like people are like, does he have wings or are they shadows or
it's the use of the word like. It says that the smoke spread out behind him like wings, basically. And
but I know different. Like Matt says they absolutely don't have wings. I'm pretty sure the guys in the Broken Sword, I remember they had an episode ages ago and they were like, absolutely has wings. Like,
oh really?
So like it's a proper debate. Like, you know, people.
From my research, I would say that they probably don't, but I wish they did. That's my 2 cents on it. But
well, I think the fact that they mention wings twice as well, like they do say like shadow built up around them like wings or something, but then they also say something about wingspan. So I think like, I don't know. I'm just going to keep on living on the fence. But guys, let us know what you think. Do Balrogs have wings or not? And also best and worst moments. But yeah, Johnny, is that all, or will we wrap up this episode?
I think so. I was going to ask you, did we do a full episode on whether Balrogs had wings or not? Oh, we did an episode on the Balrogs.
On the Balrogs, but I don't know.
No, we didn't do a full episode on just if they had wings, but we did mention it, and I think there is a large section of an episode on the Balrogs episode that we did before. So guys, go listen to that. Go check that one out.
Yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
Link it below.
We can link it below, and that's all we have time for today. I just want to say, I know he's not here, but a huge thank you to Matt for joining us on this season finale. But please let us know your best and worst moments from the episode, guys, and what you thought of the season as a whole as well. And keep an eye out for future episodes, because we might break down the entire season 2, myself and Johnny. But yeah, don't forget to drop a like and a subscribe on YouTube as well. We're slowly but surely building up on YouTube. And also, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, you can leave us a review there or comment as well. Of course, continue to check out Nerd of the Rings. I'm sure you look at his videos all the time. Matt has just posted a short interview with the Sauron actor Charlie Vickers, and he also had a really good one with Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen. Yeah, so that was a brilliant one. So guys, go check that out. But from all of us here at the Council of Elrond, we will see you next time, guys. Namarie.
See you later, guys.